Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Great American Story. I'm Ron Hoon, along with John Noetzel. John, by the way, is the creator. He is, I like to say, the genius behind this. You know what, John? I don't know if I have more fun in my life than sitting down with you and just talking history. We jump all around.
We do.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We were in the 1790s. Today, we're going right into the heart of World War II, 1942.
Yeah, this is a really fascinating battle that we're going to talk about in World War II. One that's been studied by a lot of historians, and it's one of the marquee, most well-known battles that happened in the Pacific. We're talking Pacific theater here, so we're not in Europe, but this was this battle, the Battle of Midway, was a lot of people think it was what turned the tide of the Pacific, of the war in the Pacific.
You could definitely make that argument. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I think that every American knows the story of Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
December 7th, 1941, the day that will live in infamy, the attack on our base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. However, when you dig into it, some people may not have known it did not fully cripple the United States Navy.
No, it didn't.
We had our big aircraft carriers that just happened. None of the big three were in port.
That's right.
That day.
That's right.
And so you had the Enterprise, which was delivering aircraft to Wake Island. Mm-hmm. You had the Lexington, which was delivering aircraft to the base at Midway.
Correct.
And then the Saratoga was in San Diego.
Right.
And so it was being outfitted. And right from the start, as horribly successful from the Japanese perspective as that attack was, their leader, Admiral Yamamoto, knew that those aircraft carriers were out there and they were going to be ready to fight.
What was the famous quote? He had afraid he had awakened a sleeping giant.
Yes.
Wasn't that the famous quote that he had?
Yes.
But you're right. There were and many of the characters from Pearl Harbor on the Japanese side were at Midway. So the carriers that took part in the Battle of Pearl Harbor, as well as Admiral Nimitz, he was central, and those carriers were centrally figured in the Battle of Midway. And it all kind of, I like that because we're talking about the setup here. We're talking about how this all came about. Right. No, we weren't crippled by any means. Our Navy wasn't crippled. It was seriously damaged, no question. And I think the country was probably reeling for, over this. But 6 months later, we found ourselves in the middle of the Pacific on this little atoll, basically fighting for the supremacy of the Pacific.
It's called Midway, in case people aren't aware, because it's about midway between North America and Asia.
Right.
Out there, just a little speck. I mean, if you didn't know exactly where you were headed, you'd probably fly right over it.
But strategic nonetheless.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, size-wise, it basically is two islands, one of which is I think around 1,100 square miles, correct? 1,100 square miles, is that what it was? I think
you got me on that one.
Yeah.
Not sure.
No, I think it was. Oh no, acreage.
That makes more sense.
1,100 acres.
That makes more sense.
And about 300 acres on these two islands. But the interesting part is, I think the clock. He did awaken a sleeping giant. I think the clock started ticking in Yamamoto's head almost immediately that they were going to have to follow up if they wanted literal control over the Pacific. That they were going to have to move. And they were going to have to move quickly because our manufacturing ability, let alone the anger that was being felt all across the country, and the desire in Washington and throughout the country to really begin to engage in battle. But our military might mixed with our manufacturing might was going to put a very quick time clock on what Japan wanted to do.
No question. And they saw Midway as a strategic location for them to really control the Pacific, and for them to really put a nail in the coffin on the U.S. Navy and our Pacific Fleet. this could maybe be a time that we could get into the intelligence factor of this and how this all came about. So Midway was really an intelligence success story from the American side, right?
Yeah.
Because we figured out we decrypted their messages.
Sure.
So, and that all started with this commander named Joe Rochefort, and he was based in Hawaii, and he was leading the station Hypo, which was in charge of counterintelligence, in charge of trying to decrypt the Japanese's messages, and they figured it out. It took them a while, but they figured it out.
And we had a Navajo code talker here in our building, and it was such an honor to meet him. There are just very few of them still left.
Yes.
Here in the year 2025 as we're taping this. But they never cracked our code. They never cracked our code, but we cracked theirs.
We did.
And that made such a difference just a few months later. Now, when you think about strategically the successes that they were having, I mean, you go through it. They took the U.S. Philippines.
Coral Sea.
They took the Dutch East Indies.
Yes.
They took Hong Kong.
Oh,
they took
you're talking about
Singapore.
the Japanese. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And I mean, it was like a string of victory after victory, and they really did look unstoppable.
They did.
But I think that they underestimated the fight that was eventually going to be coming.
And we had a couple of good victories there too, as well, right? I mean, we had the Doolittle,
Coral Sea, you mentioned.
Coral Sea,
Yes.
Doolittle's Raiders.
Yes.
We were talking about a little bit early, but it came down to two letters.
Okay.
AF.
Okay.
That was the letter that Rochefort and his crew figured out. AF, when they were decrypting these messages, AF stood for Midway. They were able to figure that out. They started piecing this together. They figured out a time and a date, and that the Japanese carrier group, the elite carrier group, also known as the Kido. I'm losing it, but there's a name.
John,
for it.
you're going to get you're
I
going to
know.
get 90% of these pronunciations.
I know, right? But they figured it out. They figured out that that an attack on Midway was coming because we had a base there.
Yeah.
We had personnel stationed there, and we sent a fake message that we were running out of, that our clean water was bad, and they intercepted a Japanese message about that very topic. So it confirmed what Rochefort was learning about Japanese. Yeah.
So first it was an intelligence victory.
It was.
And as you'll see as we continue with the story, it was a great sea battle victory as well. Now, you mentioned Doolittle, and I think that deserves just a little bit of the story here because he launched this raid on, now remember the Battle of Midway doesn't happen until early June of 1942. Correct. So it had been that many months since December of 1941. And, we saw Japan moving across the Pacific with victory after victory. We needed something. And Jimmy Doolittle, and his raid is really quite incredible in the level of success. He took those big, heavy B-25 Mitchell bombers and did something that no one thought could ever be done,
right?
Which was to launch them off of the deck of a ship called the USS Hornet. That ship had a runway of 467 feet total. Now, Johnny, I did a little, for our audience here in Arizona, which is where we tape The Great American Story, for comparison's sake, the longest runway at Phoenix Sky Harbor, 11,400 feet. Somehow, he got these huge B-25 bombers off these ships in 467 feet. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's something
right?
else. Something else.
The idea then was to go and bomb the Japanese homeland. It wasn't necessarily a huge strategic victory, but from a moral standpoint, the biggest moral victory that the United States had in any day since Pearl Harbor. And by the way, they knew they didn't have the fuel
to return.
Yep. The plan was to drop those bombs on the targets and then do what? Just fly on to China.
Yes.
And land. China was friendly to us in World War II, as Japan and China were obviously mortal enemies. but the vast majority of those planes never even made it to China. Many of them crashed, and because he lost so many of those planes, Doolittle thought he was going to get court-martialed. Instead, he was given the Medal of Honor.
And that's something.
Isn't that?
You're right. It was a moral victory, and it also showed, the Americans can launch planes off of a carrier now. Right. So bombers at that. So this was definitely just such a boost. A boost, right, for the American psyche and the U.S. Navy as we're moving into this. So back in Hawaii, we had an Admiral Nimitz, who was deciding what to do about Midway as he got this information from Rochefort. So Admiral Nimitz, probably one of the most famous and maybe one of the best admirals that the Navy's ever had, right?
Yes, right.
You can make that argument.
It is remarkable how throughout the course of this story, there are certain men who almost seem like they were raised up in this generation to fight this fight, to win it.
Indeed. And that actually brings us to a good trivia question for you, because it's about Admiral Nimitz. So
here we go.
Before gaining admission to the U.S. Naval Academy, what other prestigious military academy did Chester Nimitz initially attempt to get an appointment to, but was unsuccessful? The Coast Guard Academy, the U.S. Military Academy, or the Virginia Military Institute?
I love this one, John, because I really have no idea.
Really? I had to look this one up, too. It was interesting.
Yeah, as a little bit of background for you, we visit about a week ahead of time before taping, and we brainstorm, and we say, how about this, how about that kind of a thing. And then we do all of our due diligence, all of our research. And I stumble across a lot of the same facts that John does, but this one I have no idea. So I am going to guess, just because it's such an outlier, John, that it is CVMI, the Virginia Military Institute, but I guess we'll find out after the break.
Yeah,
right?
we're gonna find out after the break. You might be surprised at this one, and it kind of when you know the answer to this, it makes you kind of think that fate kind of smiled kindly on Admiral Nimitz. So
we will take a break. We'll also answer the question of why was Alaska involved of all places when it comes to this fight out there off the coast of Hawaii. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Great American Story. And today we are talking about the famous Battle at Midway. And John, this is, you said it right off the top, this is a battle that you could make the argument actually won the war in the Pacific, even though it dragged on for years to come.
Yeah, it certainly changed the dynamic of the war. I don't think that's a stretch at any case, but I mean, the Japanese, they lost 4 carriers in this battle.
Yeah. In about 24 hours.
Yes. 4 of 6 aircraft carriers in that carrier strike force. We lost 1. We lost the Yorktown. I'm sorry.
Although at one point, even after it was hit, they managed to get her back into service at least for a while.
They did, and it was a torpedo that took it out. A Japanese torpedo. So but 4 carriers to 1, and a decisive battle. And the leader of all this, we'll go back to our trivia question, is Admiral Nimitz. And we had our trivia question up there about what military academy did he initially attempt to get an appointment to, but was unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I had guessed VMI just because it seemed like it was sort of out there in left field. So, Johnny, what is the answer?
Yeah, believe it or not, it is actually B, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. He wanted to be an Army soldier.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were no slots. So his congressman gave him an appointment to the Naval Academy. And
how about that?
Fortunately for us, correct?
Goodness, yes.
I mean, and that's, it's just,
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting how
Yeah.
that worked out? And he turned out to be just one of the best admirals
True.
that the U.S. ever produced.
And he certainly he had a worthy opponent in Yamamoto.
He did.
I mean, he was in his own way a kind of a brilliant military strategist. But one of the decisions that he had made in the battle planning was that while they would attack Midway, they would actually not attack the runway. Their thinking was, we're going to cripple the American fleet that is there. We'll bomb planes if we can. We'll bomb fuel depot, hangars,
Yeah.
etc. But we're so confident we're going to win this battle that we don't want to damage the runway because it will become ours and we can use it as a forward base to launch more war against Hawaii, and potentially, I think, John, they really had their sights set on the American Pacific coast.
They did. And you talked about that Alaskan aspect to this.
Oh, yeah,
the feint. Why don't we let's just hit that real briefly.
Okay, so it was a feint.
Yep.
But it was a feint, but it was the first time since the War of 1812 that foreign forces took possession of any part of American soil.
Yeah.
And so they launched up into the Aleutian Islands in an effort to try somewhat, I think, to disguise what the big battle was that was coming. But they knew that was going to get a response, although it actually took the U.S. combined with Canadian forces to get up there and retake that island many months later.
Right.
I mean, the Japanese forces that did land out on the Aleutian Islands, they held that through the entire bitter winter of 1942-43, and it wasn't until spring of the next year. But my understanding is, I talked to my dad about this, because he was, when Pearl Harbor happened, he would have been, I think, about 12 years old.
Wow.
And there was genuine fear on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, I think probably some of Arizona, California as well, that there was going to be a Japanese invasion.
Yes.
And just by virtue of the fact that they took some of those Alaskan islands, it played right into that.
Yeah. Yet Nimitz knew that Midway was going to be attacked, right? So he sends his strike group. He sends the Yorktown, which had been repaired in record time in Pearl Harbor. He sends the Enterprise, and I believe he also sends the Hornet out there, right? So he's got all of these carriers out there, and with the Japanese not knowing that we know their plan,
right?
So we're now moving towards Midway. They're thinking we're going to attack Midway, destroy the island, leave the runways intact, but we're going to take over the island.
Right.
And little did they know that we were basically laying in wait for them, that we had strategically moved our aircraft carriers and our strike group in place.
Yes.
So the Japanese start bombing Midway Island, and they did some real destruction on that island.
I guess those radio reports coming back to the ships on the Japanese side were just filled with, from their standpoint, success after success.
And ironically, one of the officers stationed on Midway Island was a famous film director.
Oh?
Yeah, he was a famous film director who directed The Grapes of Wrath.
Yes. Wow. Yeah.
So
well,
anyway,
okay. So
note.
it's early on that day.
Yeah.
Early on the day of the battle, June the 4th, and that was a surprise, I think, to Japanese military planners. Where are all the American planes? Well, they were up in the sky and they were getting ready to go to work. And all of a sudden, let me just see if I've got this right. There was a message sent back to the base by a Captain William J. Chase. So these aircraft were out there. They were looking for those large Japanese ships. And he said, many planes headed to Midway, 150 miles out. So now we knew they were definitely closing in on the all-important island.
And there's a famous, it's called Nagumo's Dilemma. So he made a critical error in what was going on at the time. So they had just attacked the island, but Nagumo felt we needed another wave to attack them. He got this intel that there are American planes in the area, so he has to decide: do I launch my reserve planes from the carrier, or do I bring back the planes that had attacked Midway so they can refuel? They're running low on fuel. They're going to have to ditch in the sea if we don't. So he makes a critical error and he does not launch his reserves, and he brings back his planes. It creates a window of opportunity for the Americans. So all of a sudden we've got this time where they're basically grounded, right? They have very few aircraft in the air, and we were able to dive bomb these carriers. I mean, this was a tactic that was just deadly. I mean, we did it well, and we took out 4 of their carriers. I mean, so they kind of got caught, because to even go further, it was against Japanese war doctrine for them to do piecemeal attacks. So their war doctrine was, we do this as one big attack, and not. That's why he didn't launch that. Those reserve fighters. He's been pilloried for it throughout history. I mean, a lot of people look back and go, what an awful error on his part, and he took a lot of heat for that. But
so what happened to those planes that were the land-based planes that were there at Midway? They just didn't go up and fly around to avoid bombing. They were out there looking for ships to attack, and they had targets, but as they dropped their bombs, they fell harmlessly into the sea. This only the first wave I'm talking about here. And so at first, probably the overconfidence of Japanese forces probably rose a little bit. But John, it was when that second wave and that third wave and that fourth wave began to hit that all of a sudden the U.S. forces find success. And the names that, of course, are familiar to people who have studied this battle, but are not maybe household names like our ships are, the USS Arizona, for example. But the Akagi and the Karga, they came into sight, and the commander of those particular dive bombers split his forces in two. A guy named McCluskey says, all right, guys, there they are. We're going to take half of our fleet and the other half of our fleet. One of you guys go after the Akagi, the other go after the Karga. They both made direct hits. And the success of those bombs as they kind of burrowed through the wooden decks and down to the level below where the aircraft and the ammo and everything and the fuel was, it just literally lit those ships on fire with massive explosions, one after the other.
Let's go to some sound about that. We've got some clips from Movie Tone from a couple of airmen.
Carrier. We picked out the largest carrier we could find in the fleet.
How was it situated in?
It was coming toward us and toward our right. And then along with that, it was making a turn toward its right, which consequently would be toward our left. And when we hit it, we were attacking from a point about 20 degrees off of its right bow. And we led it approximately, I guess, 3/4 of a ship's length, or maybe as little as a half, because it was almost head on. And both torpedoes struck right at the bow. You know, it wasn't a thrill. Frankly, it wasn't a thrill.
How did you feel?
Well, it was more sort of a feeling of concentration in order to get your job done. That's all that we were thinking about. It was getting there and getting on through and hoping that we would be a little bit luckier than some of our comrades.
Which board, right?
I had 3 men wounded. Tail gunner was seriously wounded, and the other 2 men were hit by bullets from the fighter aircraft.
You yourself weren't touched?
No, I wasn't hit at all.
And what did you, any damage to the plane?
Yes, I had all the hydraulic system was shot out. 1 tire shot off. Gas tanks punctured about 25 rounds in each tank.
You landed under adverse conditions, in other words, when you landed.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how cool and calm those guys are? And it's just business. It's business as usual. And these were young guys.
Yeah, they were.
They were with little training, not a lot of training. Yeah. Real quick, just some numbers on here. 4 carriers lost by the by the Japanese, one aircraft carrier on the American side. The Japanese lost approximately 3,000 men, like I said, 4 carriers, 1 cruiser, and 292 aircraft. The United States lost 307 men, 1 carrier, 1 destroyer, and about 144 aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Decisive.
Yeah.
Decisive.
It really was.
Historic.
And there was, it was such a total victory for the United States. There had been talk of one last attempt to attack Midway, and about 7 p.m. that night, that final wave of dive bombers came out of the clouds. And I think at that point, the Japanese forces said, "We are beaten. Let's get out of here." Midway was a huge success.
They call it the greatest generation for a reason, don't they?
They sure do. And that is today's Great American Story.